For those whom he foreknew, he also predestined to be conformed to the image of his Son, in order that he might be the firstborn among many brothers. And now I know a lot of people try to use this verse and the next verse to talk about predestination and election, and that God has chosen some for salvation. But actually, when you understand the context, the emphasis is so important. The emphasis is not who has God chosen, who hasn't God chosen, who are the special elect ones in God's cosmic lucky draw. The emphasis is not on who has God chosen. The emphasis is on that God has predestined people to be transformed to the image of his Son. That's what God had chosen before time had even began. That mankind would not try to relate to God through their own righteousness and through their own image, but that mankind would relate to God through Christ and through Christ's image. And so it was always God's plan to send Jesus, even before time began, even before Adam and Eve. God had already planned and predestined that Jesus was the lamb slain before the foundation of the earth. And God's plan A was that Jesus would die for the sins of mankind so that people could be born again and become one with Christ and receive his righteousness. That is the emphasis of these scriptures, because it's in the context of Paul giving us hope. Paul is not building a doctrine about who's chosen and who's not. Paul is building a doctrine about why we can have hope in this life, because the Spirit is the first fruits in us. We have been born of the Spirit. Although we don't see it in our flesh, we wait for it patiently because we have this hope that our flesh will be transformed to be like Christ. And we will spend eternity with God, because what God has started in us by the Spirit, he is going to finish in us in our flesh. What God has started, he's going to finish. And that is a guarantee. And this is the hope that we have, which inspires us to endure through this world now. And so, verse 30, he says, and those whom he predestined, he also called, and those whom he called, he also justified, and those whom he justified, he also glorified. He also glorified. And that right there is the emphasis. God has predestined before the foundation of the world that Jesus would be the lamb slain, so that whosoever shall have faith in Christ would be born again and would be justified and would receive the first fruits of the Spirit. And because that has happened, they are given the guarantee of glorification. And so if you follow this progression of hope here, you will see very clearly the emphasis of these two verses is not who God has chosen. We're not supposed to try and build a big doctrine about who God has chosen, election and predestination. The emphasis is that what God has started in us, he will complete upon his return. Glorification is the emphasis here. And it's to give us hope to be able to endure anything in this world.